Hello, everyone. Welcome back to This and That, my advice channel. And today we're talking about conversations, and more particularly, communication just in general. So, when you are talking to somebody, you need to actually make it so that you are clearly understood. How you do this is openly up to interpretation. Like, you need to be able to consider the context of the person you're talking to, right? If you're talking to a little kid, you might want to use simpler language. If you're talking to experienced or aspired researcher who may not be super social but may understand technical things very well, you need to be able to explain the technical things. And if you have something more semantic, it might be more difficult to understand. That's the point when you start using analogies. So just having a lot of proprietary knowledge in general is beneficial for your case. And so is being able to understand other people, where they come from, their context, what builds them. It makes it easier for you to be able to communicate with that person because you are quote unquote speaking their language. And more so importantly, over any of that, is that what you are saying needs to be clear. It is very possible that the person that you are working with just like doesn't really understand. They just aren't maybe a very cerebral person, but it is still a skill to be able to make people who are not particularly good with information, or maybe in conversations, or even within the subject matter that you are talking about, be able to understand something. The sign that you are a great communicator means that you turn a complex thing into a very simplistic thing, as in you break down a very general task into smaller parts, make it more comprehensible, which I personally believe that things are not inherently complicated, they just have multiple pieces moving out at once. If you ever had to solve a system of equations for the first time, you're like, well, what is going on? And being able to handle things that are multivariable or turning it into single variable is kind of how we solve almost all problems, right? We isolate a particular incident and then we are able to draw conclusions about how that one thing actually affects the things that we're working on. It's called an obligation study. So, with that being said, let's rank them. Number one, most important thing is honestly contextualization. You cannot communicate. Well, first of all, you need to know your own idea clearly, but you cannot communicate clearly with somebody if you have no clue even where to start talking about someone. So, the first thing that you need to do is actually be able to understand what you are working with. I personally like having structured environments, like a lecturer, for example, or a teacher, where you know how you're supposed to interact with that person. In a classroom, you might be more academic. If you are at like a conference, you're doing networking, you might talk about the stuff that is actually going on at the conference, or you might talk about general life stuff, which is more open to interpretation. At a coffee shop, you might not be expected to be social at all. You should just keep to yourself, maybe. Or possibly you're expected to be there with a friend, or you're supposed to be working on a cafe, or you might be a little bit quieter. But being able to actually read the room and talk to people in a way that they expect it to be talked to relative to your environment is important. Because if you don't know somebody, you don't know anything about them, but you do know stuff about the ways that you are. I'm not saying you should make an inference and you should start judging people and you take a guess, but if you can, it definitely will help you. I can say that the difference between, shouldn't say this, but Asian people that I've experienced and a lot of really good business people is that they're just good racists, right? Or they're really good at classifying and judging someone based off of like what they wear, how they present themselves, their posture, body language. Like if you can pick up on those signals, in which I can tell you right now, I personally can't because it's almost entirely subjective, then you are putting yourself leagues ahead of your average individual. So stuff to think about. That being said, let's move on to next thing. It is clearly communicating, which means you also need to actually know what you are talking about. If I am talking about software engineering, I should be pretty well versed. I should be well in depth. I love to stay informed. I know well what I'm talking about. You need to have a large prior knowledge base, or you need to have a large data domain, or knowledge base, or knowledge domain, whatever you want to call it. You need to have proprietary knowledge, because if somebody is always explaining something to you, it makes it harder for them to understand for you to understand what they're talking about. And it goes both ways. If somebody has no clue what you're talking about, if they never had any prior experience with it, it makes it more difficult for them to actually understand what you are talking about. I've said in previous videos that there is this communication gap between individuals because there's a lived experience part. Like someone says, oh, the stove is hot. You're like, okay, I know what hot means. I believe you, I trust you, but I'm still gonna like, maybe I'm you're the person who puts their hand on it just to make sure. And yeah, that frankly is just the human experience. Like we understand language because we understand the human experience, which is relatively consistent. But you need to actually experience things as a human in order to understand what people mean, like where they're coming from with something, right? Like if I was always cold and I never experienced heat and somebody said hot and I just said the opposite of cold, I needed that cold to ground me to understand what hot might be. And I still may not understand the sensation because, well, I've never experienced hot. So developing things from a mutual basis of understanding, as in you have like an analogy, for example, means everything. And then third, I kind of talked about it, but your techniques, right? If you have somebody who doesn't understand something, you need to work within their knowledge domain and draw an analogy. Humans are naturally good at comparison and classification. We like putting labels on everything. We like drawing comparisons to everything, for the dismay of some and for the success of others. But it is second nature for humans to be able to draw inferences from past data, right? It's like if you mess up, you die. There is no second chance, right? So you need to be able to look at a cliff, and even though you've never fallen down a cliff, you'd be like, yeah, I can't survive that, right? And this last part, this final piece that I kind of want to touch on when it comes to communication is, well, just talking. Like, get used to speaking with people and putting your ideas out there and structuring your thoughts. If you do not understand what you're trying to talk about, how do you expect somebody else to try to understand what you are talking about, right? Conversations, they go both ways. And I feel like people don't really structure their thoughts. They kind of do things very intuitively. Speaking a common tongue, frankly, means being able to put yourself out there and, well, not only put yourself in somebody else's shoes, but, use the language. There is structure to language. There is grammar. There is slang. There is context circles. And there's a lot of stuff, honestly, that I'm not very well versed in. But if you follow the etymology nerd, you will be able to understand that language gets deep and complicated. But frankly, there is no bad language, right? As long as you are understood, it's good language. So there's not like one particular phrase which is bad. Like, people say slurs behind closed doors and you could argue that they're bad, but if nobody gets hurt in the process and if everybody understands what you mean, well, the slur is just another word. So words are not as important as how people perceive them. And yes, that is inherently attached to the word, but like, words have so many definitions and it's so subjective to context. So actually being able to look at that and understand what you mean and aligning it with what other people think you mean, getting that feedback loop, and you get that by just talking to people, training the skill, is very important for communication. So generally, to recap, actually talk to people, but most importantly, you need to be able to contextualize and try to understand other people and where they're coming from, get that feedback loop, and actually learn what you are talking about. Like, you need to be able to structure your thoughts and understand things, and you build from there. Right? So clear communication, a genuine skill that way more people could benefit from. Make yourself clear, make yourself actionable, and work within what other people's know. Okay, bye-bye.